Before going to start the session, Dr. Lavanya Madam is going to introduce the search profile. It is beneficial for all of us. Madam, let us continue, madam.
Yes, ma'am. Myself, Dr. M. Lavanya, working as Associate Professor in Department of ECE. I am honored to introduce our eminent resource person, Dr. Sudhakar sir, who is working as Associate Professor in the School of Electronic Engineering at VIT, Vellore. He did all his professional degrees, undergraduate, postgraduates, as well as research from Madras Institute of Technology. He previously served IIT Kottayam and IIIT MK Trivandrum as an associate professor in Department of Electronics Engineering. Prior to joining this academic job, he served different core industries in different roles. He has worked with different projects granted by ISRO PRS. He has also worked in collaboration with various industries like Robert Bosch, John Electronic, Electricals, Infosys, etc. Currently, he is working on the areas like computer vision, human computer interaction, as well as visualization. He is fond of image classification, and I welcome you, sir, Sudhakar sir, to proceed the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for the brief invitation. And I thank each and every professor for giving this opportunity to basically discuss about the concepts related to segmentation as well as classification. And before proceeding with this, I just wanted to outline one important thing. So even though the topic that is going to be discussed today is actually which has been studied by each and every individual under the course called as image processing or digital image processing, but the flavor is going to be the same, but the mathematics of the topic is going to be dealt in a different way. So basically
Sir, it is not audible.
So am I audible now?
Yeah, yeah.
Sir, actually, what to say? See, actually, I started with the segmentation. So, two important aspects of data analytics are going to be dealt today. One is segmentation and classification. So, even though my area of specialization is image processing, but I generally call it as data analysis, because the way in which we are interpreting data differentiates whether it is a signal, if it is a one-dimensional information, or if it is going to be a two-dimensional information, we name it as image, or if it is going to be three-dimensional image, we call it as video, or if it is going to be the data which has multiple dimensions, we call it as hyperdata or hyperspectral images. So the data in general is referred to as different in different names, referred to different names across different domains. So that is the idea. So based upon that, I will start my discussion. And before proceeding with the discussion, we have to understand there is a very thin line that is distinguishing the process of segmentation and classification. So segmentation and classification both are similar to a extent, certain extent. Only differentiation is that in the case of classification, the data that we have segregated or separated or segmented is going to be labeled. That is the major distinction between the process of segmentation and classification. So with this brief introduction about the topic that I'm going to discuss today, I'll start my presentation. Sir, can you see the, ma'am, sir, can you see the presentation slide that has been shared?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. So, and I expect the session to be an interactive session because, as I discussed, I started earlier that It is going to be a mixture of how our human visual system responds to the segmentation task and how our mathematics or how we make use of mathematics for defining the process. So the first and foremost thing is that what is basically segmentation. So segmentation, as all of us know, that our intention is to basically segment the data. Segment the data is nothing but categorize the data. So how to categorize the data? Partition the data based upon the characteristics, inherent characteristics of that particular data. So what is that inherent characteristics? It may be a color, it may be the texture, it may be any other characteristic of the data which is inherent to the image. So our intention is to basically take data here I'm referring to is nothing but image, and decompose the image into different groups or subsets so that each group can be identified with some separate label, or that becomes classification. So here you can see the image of Mona Lisa is taken, where on the left hand side the boundaries of the image is actually drawn. So you should not confuse that the entire air is completely black, but still on the top of the air there is one distinct region which is differentiated in the subsequent regions or subsequent images also. This is because there is an object which is actually present on the head of that particular image, on the air of the particular image, which is identified in the labels, or it is uniquely labeled, and there is a pseudo color which is actually identifying that it is different, and the mean of all those things. So here what we are trying to understand is that given data to us, so each data or each pixel in that particular data is having some characteristic or property that helps us to distinguish the different pixels based on their properties, and those properties are listed here: the gray level, color, texture. If it is video, we are going for motion. So likewise there are numerous properties. So this is the first thing. So what I have done here is I have taken an image, and the distinguished objects or distinguished texture regions in that image are identified by boundaries, and they are labeled, and those labels or those regions are identified by pseudo colors, and then the average of those colors are basically drawn here. So in all the regions you have to understand that there is a problem with this process of segmentation. What is that which is actually happening here? There is over segmentation which has happened here. Why over segmentation? Because if you take air, the air of that particular image, there is one region which is completely dark, okay, that is identified as a different region, and here there is under segmentation. Why under segmentation? On the left hand side of the image, first image, you can see water and trees. So the ability to distinguish between the trees and the water is lost. So these are all the problems that we are going to discuss in detail today. So as I told you earlier, segmentation is nothing but partitioning or data getting categorized into different sets. So one is how to divide the data based on the similarity, or if it is going to be video, or if it is going to be an hyperspectral data, we can go for spatio-temporal volume, or if it is going to be a video, we can go for foreground and background. Take the entire image, decompose it into foreground and background. So capture the foreground separately, capture the background separately. The reason why we do it, because in the foreground only the object is going to be present, whereas the background is going to carry the texture information associated with the image, and then regions that are going to be overlapped. So this is how we perform partitioning. On the other hand, there is one more division of this segmentation that is called as clustering. So here the clustering is basically done based upon the similarity, based upon the correlation between the pixels, or the based upon the spatial correlation or the pixel correlation. So that is going to be used for categorizing the pixels into different clusters or different groups. So that is actually based upon the process of clustering. Okay, so when it is going to be highly connected, so let us take for example the image that I have shown just now. So that is an image which is image having higher spatial correlation. That is an example of densely correlated data. Whereas in the case of sparsely correlated data, or if the correlation between there are going to be numerous objects in the image, in that case obviously it leads to sparse correlation. So in that case what we have to do, we have to go for model fitting. So this is the outline of our discussion today. For the next 1 hour I'm going to discuss in detail about all these things and what are the algorithms that we are making use of, and how those algorithms are mathematically applied for solving real-time problems. If at all, if any individual is finding difficult to understand the discussion, you can stop me so that I will explain it once again. Okay. So this is a best example of segmentation. So here you have the image or the video, and as I told you earlier, in the foreground you have the information pertaining to the object, and in the background you can see that it is completely black. In the two frames you can see it is completely black, or it is either completely white, where in the last image you are drawing some kind of wire diagram to basically formulate the motion information associated with the object. So the motion information associated with the object is basically captured by making use of such kind of motion vectors, or it is kind of wire diagram. So this is what is actually the foreground or background separation process in the case of segmentation. Yes, the one that I discussed just now. There are two errors. What are those two errors? Although there is this particular top region of the air, it's air only, there is no other object there, but still because of over segmentation, what has happened that this particular region is identified as a different cluster, or it is identified as a different region. So that is actually leading to over segmentation. And the one that I told you, under segmentation. So here, because of under segmentation, the distinction between trees and water is completely missing. Okay, so these are the two types of errors that we will generally come across in the process of segmentation. Okay, so the outline of, so with the brief introduction, so the outline of today's segmentation is going to be dealing with how our human visual system is going to deal with the process of segmentation, because it is the visual system which is actually helping us to formulate different types of algorithms, and those algorithms are basically modeled by making use of objectives, or the objective models are basically formulated based on our visual understanding of the scene that we are seeing. Okay, so how human segmentation plays a vital role here, that we call it as geostalic mechanism. So anyway, I'm going to discuss that. And what are the algorithms that are available? Standard algorithms, and the three types of algorithms which we have earlier studied in image processing. And we are going to discuss it with an example, or mathematically how it is actually done. Then the watershed algorithm, which is basically working by making use of the morphological properties of images. And finally, based upon the graph theory, we'll be discussing about normalized cuts and how the classification is done based upon clustering. So this is the outline of my presentation today. Okay, so now let us start with human segmentation. So the human segmentation, based on the human segmentation, what we can see here is a image of 6 dots. Okay, image of 6 dots. So as such, if an individual sees the picture comprising this image, so he is going to just understand it as 6 dots. Now you just understand what has actually happened. The 6 dots that were separated placed at equidistance. Now I am bringing it in the form of pairs. Okay, so as soon as I bring it in the form of pairs, okay, so immediately my visual system, human visual system, says that okay, they are actually in the form of groups. Previously they were equidistant, they are placed at equidistance. Now as soon as I narrow down the gap between the subsequent dot pairs, what happens is that the proximity, that is, they are brought close together, and this closeness between them is giving an information to the human visual system that they are actually in the form of pairs. So from 6 dots, now it has been scaled down to 3 groups of dot pairs. 3 groups of dot pairs. It is because of the nature of our visual system. Now again, in that one more distinction, what is that we have done? Out of the 6 dots, 2 dots have been colored as white. Okay, colored as white. So from that itself, we can say that okay, there are 3 pairs and only 2 pairs are black in color and 1 pair is completely white in color. So these are all the perception of our visual system. So now the perception is based upon what? It is based upon the property of similarity. So the similarity is basically modeled by making use of the white color. So the white color between the 2 dots helps us to distinguish the remaining colors which are black in nature, remaining dots which are black. Okay, again we go back to the same thing. So you can see that again 3 groups of dot pairs. Now if I enclose it, okay, if I enclose it, now after enclosing, So all of them are bounded by rectangular regions or rectangular boxes. So this enclosing has actually given us information, given us the information that they are still in the form of pairs. So these are all the phenomenon that is actually experienced by my human visual system. So that is why it is actually documented here. Okay. So now you can see that I interleave the first, I actually drop out the first dot and the last dot. Now I am interconnecting the second dot with the third dot, likewise fourth dot with the fifth dot. So that means the last two dots are completely removed. Okay. So this is another type of proximity tendency, that is the closeness. Okay. Now this is the psychology that I was discussing. This is the psychology that was discussed in the previous slides. So this psychology we called as Gestalt psychology, which is nothing but after seeing an image or after seeing the data or after seeing a video, what is that which is perceived by the human mind? Okay, what is that which is perceived by the human mind based on the individual presentation and based on the behavior as a whole or a group? That is what is actually the psychology that we actually formulated by this people who are working, psychologists who are working in this area. So that psychology is called as Gestalt psychology, where as soon as an image, okay, when it is visualized by our human visual system, okay, or the human mind, so what it thinks is that it first formulates a thought about the overall image, and then it is going to take into consideration the context of the entire image only, not the individual objects in the present in the image. It is basically perceiving the entire image as a whole. Okay, after that only it is going to come to a conclusion what type of relationship is actually existing between the different entities that are present in the object. So you can see that it is going to sense the world around. Okay, it is going to sense the world around us, and based on, okay, whatever it is actually happening, it is not going to quantify at the initial instance. So it is not going to make an understanding of what is actually happening at the initial instant. So it is going to perceive the objects, okay, as a part of the greater goal and as elements of more complex system. So this is actually the context of the idea behind this Gestalt psychology. So you can see here whatever we have discussed in the previous slides. First, it is not group, then proximity, that is the closeness between the adjacent dots, then the similarity, then again similarity. What we have done is from the circular regions we have elongated in the form of circles, and then it has become an ellipse, and the two ellipses are placed in the horizontal position and the remaining two ellipses are placed in the vertical position. Likewise the common fate and then the common region. So you can see that previously we didn't get an idea. Now based upon the different arrangements or diverse arrangements, we are slowly ending up with the conclusion that there is some kind of similarity is existing between the different dots that are present in the image. Okay, again this is another type of illusion. So this is the psychology. So one is parallelism. Okay, parallelism, even though the 6 lines that you have witnessing, all of them are distinct, but they are existing in the form of pairs. So parallelism. So obviously we correlate parallelism. Next you can see it is symmetrical. So even though all of them are 6 lines, 6 different curves, but still 2 of them share some similar properties. They are symmetrical. Then the lines which are continuous, then the lines which are closure, and then the smiley which we are familiar with. So all these things are basically, so as soon as we come across this smile, okay, this is a smiley. So okay, the conception is that okay, the person is happy. So this is the psychology that I was discussing. Okay, then going to the next thing, the Muller-Lyer illusion. Okay, so where you can see that, okay, you can see that both the lines are of same size, both the lines are of same length, but it is our illusion. It is an illusion, okay, where it comes to a conclusion that there are 2 different lines which are of varying length. So how this varying is actually happening? One is 2 important things. One is there is a depth problem here. Because how this depth problem? Because it is actually the arrows which is protruding inwards and protruding outwards. That is actually based upon that arrows, we perceive it basically that one line is larger than the other line. That is, the length of one line is larger than the other line. So this is actually one of the phenomenon observed by this psychologist, and they have labeled it as the person who has actually analyzed this. This is actually falling under the category of optical illusion, where what has actually happened is that two lines of same length appear to be of different lengths. Okay, so two lines of same length, but it is appearing of two different lengths. It's because of the reason that the fins of the arrows are protruding outwards. The ones which are protruding outwards appears to be the longest, whereas the fins which are appearing inwards, that is, I'm referring to this structure, protruding outwards. So this seems to we come to a conception that it is longest, but for the one which is protruding inwards, that is the bottom figure, we assume that it is shortest. Okay, so that is not the same. Both of them are actually having the same length. So this is the one which is actually the problem related to our illusion, and this is actually identified by the German philosopher. Okay, so his name is psychologist, his name is Muller, or Franz Karl Muller. So based upon his perception, it is called as Muller-Lyer illusion. Okay, so this is actually falling under the problem of constancy scaling. Okay, constancy scaling, because of the perception that is actually perceived by the human brain. Okay, so this is actually the problem which is called as constancy scaling, and this is because of the reason that depth cube explanation. Okay, so this is one type of problem that we have. Okay, then the same thing, 3D interpretation of the Muller-Lyer. So the same thing, you can see that one object, because of the depth that I told you, because of the depth, one person, two objects, so totally there are four objects. Because of the depth, the person who is actually walking away from the camera, they are assumed to be of smaller size, whereas the person who are closer to the camera, we are assuming that they are of larger size. But if you see, when you are bringing all the four entities or five entities together, they are going to be representing the similar objects which are going to be having similar size or similar dimensions. But because of the camera which is actually placed at some focused in a particular direction or particular orientation, the human visual system interprets that the people who are far away from this camera or the scene that is being visualized, they are smaller in terms of dimensions, whereas the people who are closer, they are larger in terms of dimensions. So this is the problem that is faced by the optical illusion. Okay, then the other case is related to the illusory contours, or this is called as illusory contours, or it is called as subjective contours, which is the best example here is the Canizza triangle. Okay, so Canizza triangle is a triangle where you have spatially separate fragments. Okay, but these fragments are different, but ultimately we come to a conclusion they are triangles which are bright white triangle. Okay, bright white triangle which are defined by sharp illusionary contours. Okay, so sharp illusionary contours or illusory contours are nothing but those three occluding black circles. Okay, the three, actually the main problem here is the three circles occluding black circles and the outer layered black triangle. Okay, the three occluding circles and the outer layered black triangle are the ones which are actually the six objects that are present in the image. Because of that, we actually first think about the completely white triangle, but it is not an object which is present there. This is called as illusory contour, or it is actually called as subjective contours, which basically evoke the perception of an edge without a luminance. Okay, without a luminance or a color variation. The edges are nothing but because you have the three occluded circles, which is actually chopped away one segment of it. Okay, 145-degree segment of those three occluded circles are chopped away. Likewise, the lines connecting the triangles are completely removed, and all of them are placed in this particular arrangement. But the human visual system perceives that there is one white triangle because of the edge, okay. Whereas, okay, because of the edge is nothing but the edges that are present across the occluded triangles and occluded circle as well as the triangle, due to which my visual perception system thinks that there is actually a triangular object which is completely white in nature. So this is one of the famous example, or it's called as the Ganiza triangle. Okay, so this is about illusory contours. So similar kind of illusory contours, like you have an object of circle, you can see an object of a spiral object. So likewise, you are witnessing some contours here. So this is again a type of illusory contour. Okay, then the two final examples that you can see here is nothing but the object of a dog, a Dalmatian dog. Okay, on the left hand side you can see the object of a Dalmatian dog, which is getting, okay, closer towards the actual picture. So what we think that is that in the foreground the object is present, but you cannot see what has actually happened because the texture information is completely merged with the background. Because if you take the image of a Dalmatian dog, it is going to contain black spots that are sparsely distributed throughout the entire body of the dog. Okay, so this is giving us a perception that there is an image of completely dark, okay, only the texture that you are seeing, but obviously there is one object of a dog, okay, an animal object. The animal here is the object here is an animal which is a dog, and it is a Dalmatian dog. Likewise, you can see on the right hand side, you can see an image of a zebra which is collated or which is merged in the background. So you can see that the stripes of zebra is actually displayed on the wall. Along with that, the object zebra is there. So my visual system assumes that both of them are actually the same image, but actually the zebra animal is actually, the image of the zebra animal is actually merged with the background. So this is actually giving a perception that as such it is one single object. Okay, so whatever we have discussed so far, okay, is actually something related to how our visual system has perceived the entire information. How our visual system has perceived the entire information. So that is actually the one which I was discussing. So how the humans, or how my human visual system is actually dealing with this different variations with respect to the perceived information in terms of data. Okay, now let us go with the conventional algorithms. So anyhow, you may find it very simple because all of us have studied this algorithms in detail while we are doing your undergraduate or postgraduate. But the main distinction here is I am going to deal with the same algorithm here by making use of mathematical examples. Okay, because the reason why I am discussing this, I will tell you, even though lot of experts who have worked in this area and lot of people who are working, or I am working with a team of experts from the companies that have been outlined by the by ma'am, like Bosch, because we are going for data labeling in live video. Even people with sentiment for fire safety systems with Infosys. So likewise, we are working with different projects. Even though they are experts, industrial experts who are working those areas, but they are finding it extremely difficult because they know how to make use of those libraries or the software which is available with them and then realize the process. But the problem is basically associated with the data, the mathematics of the data. So that is what is going to be the presentation, is going to be my presentation today. So I have already studied this algorithm, but I don't know how to interpret the algorithm. I don't know the mathematics of that algorithm. So for that only I have taken this. Again, I'm revisiting the topics that we have earlier studied in your undergraduate and postgraduate. Okay. So first, let us go with the general rule of segmentation. Okay, the general rule of segmentation. Given a set of data, okay, so now we have to segment the data or divide the data into small sets, where my overall image is nothing but the union of the subsets. That is what is given here mathematically. My overall image corresponds to what? The union of those subsets. So if I have a subset, I'm going to, if I'm having an image, I'm going to divide the image into small subsets, where each subset is basically formulated based upon the properties of those pixels. So in subset 1, you group a set of pixels, and those pixels will have some properties which are common to that particular subset. Likewise, subset 2, subset 3, subset 4, likewise it goes on. That property which is defined by that subset is completely local to that subset alone. It cannot be globally distributed. It means, let us take for example, what is it global local? If I measure the correlation or the correlation of that particular subset, so that correlation that I call as intra-correlation. If I measure the correlation of pixels in that particular subset, you can see that the intra-correlation value of those pixels in the subset will be higher. Whereas if I measure the intercorrelation between the two subsets, that is subset 1 and subset 2, they will not be similar because of the distinct nature of pixels which are going to be present in subset 1 and subset 2. So here I quantify it by making use of the correlation parameter. So how that is done? I take an image, decompose the image into small subsets based upon the properties, pixel properties. So if I take the union of all those subsets, what I will get is the image. Likewise, if I find the intersection between subset 1 and the subset 2, and likewise it goes on, it should always end in a null set. Okay, that means it is not overlapping. That means it is a disjoint set. Okay, that is a disjoint set. Now, how to define the relationship? How to define the relationship between the pixels in the particular region? So that's why we call it as homogeneous. So as such, a subset is going to be homogeneous in nature, and as such, an image is heterogeneous in nature. Okay, so here the homogeneity is basically quantified by making use of this predicate rule, where R corresponds to the region. So here region is nothing but your overall image. If that is equal to true, based upon the similarity, otherwise it is going to be false. So regions to be homogeneous. So as I told you earlier, it is going to be equal to true for all I, and if it is going to be false for all adjacent regions. So this is the one that I explained it to you with respect to the correlation. So pixels in the subset, if they are highly correlated, that is called as intra-correlation. So that correlation between the pixels in the same set will be higher. So that's what is given by the predicate rule 1. If you take the correlation between the subsequent subsets or adjacent subsets, they will not have higher correlation value. That is, the correlation value will be less than 0.5 or 0.6 or 0.7. Correlation value greater than 0.8 will be considered as good correlation value, 0.8 to 1. So I am just giving some values. Okay, in general, any value which is lying between 0 to 0.8 to 1 will be considered as a good correlation. So any value which is lesser than that, we can conclude that it is lesser correlation. So in that regard, we can see here the second predicate rule that I told you, based upon the correlation values which are going to be existing between the subsequent regions, we can conclude that they are not related. So this is disjoint. Okay, so here, before starting with the process, let me explain about this thing. So splitting, merging, splitting algorithm. So we have studied in image processing. So I am analyzing the same process in a different perspective, because we would have studied about clustering, how to group it, how to do it. That is nothing but it is actually pointing to the image processing operation that we have done earlier or studied earlier. If I talk about splitting, that is called as divisive clustering. If I talk about merging, that is called as agglomerative clustering. That's what you can see here. Okay, in the case of the divisive clustering or in the case of splitting, we start with a single pixel value, okay, and we traverse across the entire region, and based upon the properties, what we do, we basically throw away the heterogeneous regions or the inhomogeneous regions, and then finally what we get is nothing but a cluster of regions which are going to yield two distant components. So the matrix maybe, for example, can be a Euclidean distance metric, or it can be a Mogollon distance metric, or it can be a Manhattan distance metric. So any kind of metric. So one that I told you earlier was correlation. Likewise, you can deploy a distance metric here, and the closeness between the two pixels can be quantified by making use of the distance measure. So the property is here is always true. So obviously this divisive clustering will finally end up with more number of disjoint regions, and also the true region will be satisfied. Okay, now in the case of merging, so the one that we started earlier was with respect to region. Now we are going to start with respect to one pixel value. So we start with one pixel value, and then based on the pixel value, we distinguish the different regions. And then after distinguishing the different regions, based on the intra-correlation or based on the Euclidean distance between the different regions, what we can do is we can club those distinct regions. Okay, because of the homogeneous nature, what we can do is we can club those distinct regions, so that this is called as agglomerative clustering. Okay, and this is the clustering that works better. That's why, because of some practical experience, out of practical experience, I can say that this is the clustering, that is merging algorithm is the type of clustering, or the agglomerative clustering is the type of clustering which helps us to perform segmentation in a more efficient manner compared to the splitting method or the divisive clustering method. So this is the one. So you can see that in both the cases, the property one is always true, and we have to ensure that the adjacent regions in the case of the agglomerative clustering are highly distinct. So this is the major distinction between divisive clustering and agglomerative clustering. So now going to the next method, which is the region splitting. So region splitting, as we all know that we take the region, divide it into small quadrants, and calculate the relationship between the quadrants, and formulate a tree. Okay, so this tree in turn will help us to identify to what extent this region, sub-region, or the smallest region is connected with the different or distinct objects that are going to be present in the overall image. So this is actually one of the important process when it comes to the segmentation. This is called as quad-tree segmentation. What we do, we basically start with the decomposition of an image into quadrants, 4 quadrants, and repeat the process across each quadrant till you finally end up with the region which cannot be split at all, or we cannot be merged at all. So this is actually one example of split and merge algorithms. Okay, so here you can see that on the left hand side I have an image. First A, B, C, D, it has been decomposed into A, B, C, D. Again from A, again 4 quadrants, AA, AB, AA, and A. Okay, so AC or AD. Again AC, the AD is decomposed into ADA, ADB, ADC, ADD. So likewise the process goes on until we are left up with no regions that can be further split, or it can be merged. So this is the process of region split. Now here we are applying this split and merge algorithm. Okay, where we are going to apply the quad tree decomposition. Now you can see a fire hydrant here, a fire hydrant, where you can see a fire hydrant on top of standing on top of a grass region, and behind that you have a background which is completely a bush, okay, or trees that are trees or plants which have grown. So now applying the quad tree algorithm. So apply the quad tree algorithm. What we'll do first, we'll decompose it into 4 quadrants. We'll first decompose this image into 4 quadrants and then perform the splitting process. After splitting, what you can see that, so each region, so after splitting, what we have done is we have assigned pseudo colors to each regions, and this pseudo colors, okay, you can see with respect to the bushes which are behind, you can see all of them are somewhat similar in the after split region which are similar, and the only distinction there is that the level of illumination has in turn changed the level of illumination in the background of the image has in turn changed the properties of that particular region, due to which you can see when I'm going to merge it, there are different colors, but after merging you can see that the entire fire hydrant is merged with the same pseudo color. So this is how we basically apply segmentation using the split and merge algorithm. Okay, so how to merge 2 clusters? This is the one that I was discussing earlier. So find out the distance between the different clusters. One is intra-cluster, that is the distance between pixels in that particular cluster, and the other one is the inter-cluster, that is the distance between the subsequent clusters or the adjacent clusters. So that distance is called as the inter-cluster distance, and those clusters in which you are going to have pixels, okay, that distance between the pixels is called as intra-color distance. Okay, so now you see here there are different types of linking here. Single link clustering, so you can see here 4 types of clustering here: the single link clustering, complete link clustering, group average clustering and the root clustering. So you have to understand that the distinction with which I started the process: segmentation, classification. So under segmentation, I'm going for clustering. Till now, I have not discussed about classification because I am not going to label anything here. Okay, so that is the concept with which, or that is the thought with which I started the process. Okay, in the single link clustering, you are trying to find out a link, or trying to establish a link between the 2 points, 2 points or 2 pixels which are sharing some common properties. So the 2 pixel values are identified with different colors. You can see a set of pixels which are highlighted blue circle. So all of them colors which are blue and yellow encircled, which are colored with blue circle, and so that means they are all representing some type of clusters. So I'm making use of. So this distance metric gives a value of some 0.6 or 0.7. So in the case, okay, this distance between this link and this cluster and this cluster is closer. So I'm drawing a single link here. Whereas in the case of complete link, what has actually happened is that I'm finding out the distance between the points or the clusters which are farther away, which are very far away from them. Okay, which are very far away from them, and that is going to give us the make sure that all the other neighboring closer neighboring clusters are covered when I'm going to establish the link. So this is called as complete link, where the responsibility of the two different clusters which are very far away, by means of which the drifting problem is removed. So drifting here refers to what? The other clusters which are in the neighboring region, they will also be considered instead of neglecting them. Okay. Then the group clustering. So group clustering here, I will do it by taking the average distance between the yellow clusters and the blue clusters. So that is called as group clustering, group average clustering. But the problem with group average clustering is that if at all, if the clusters formulated, or if it is going to be a noisy data, what happens is that the impact of noise will be distributed across the different clusters. So the smoothing process will happen if I'm going to go for averaging. So that is also one problem, but it ensures that most of the clusters are covered in the overall segmentation process without neglecting some points, even though some isolated points are going to be there and it is going to be representing a single cluster there, that cluster also will be considered. So that is group average clustering. And the other one is the root clustering, which I told you start with the seed point and you just establish the complete link. Okay, start with the seed point of 1 pixel and then you try to connect all those things, collect all those pixels in that particular cluster, so that all the points in the particular cluster are linked. And also likewise the points between the subsequent clusters also linked. So that is actually the process of root cluster. Okay, then comes the other type of representation, which is called as dendrograms. So dendrograms is nothing but it is actually a process of finding out or establishing a relationship between multiple entities that are going to be present in our data. Okay, so that is actually dendrogram. So what happens is that the length of the dendrogram, length of the shape is between the neighboring elements or the neighboring clusters. For example, let us take the raw data. So if you take the raw data, you can see that there are totally 6 clusters, and these 6 clusters are based on the they are connected together, 1, 2, 3 are, as I told you earlier. So A is not at all, and D and C are connected or closer to F, and that is why in the next level of hierarchy you can see that D is merged with DF, and in the next level of hierarchy BC is merged with BCDEF. Only in the third part you can see A is actually merged. A is actually merged. So if you go to the dendrograms, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can see that BC formulate as 1, 2. Then you have DE, which is 4, 5. and sorry, DE, which is 1, 2, and 4, 5, which is BC. So all of them are clubbed together and you formulate this dendrogram. So dendrogram is basically a process of arranging the data in a hierarchical format so as to understand the nature of relationship which is existing between the subsequent clusters in the overall image data. That is formulated by dendrograms. So this is an example of HCS, that is the hierarchical clustering scheme. So in this case, what we have done here is we have taken some 5 nodes, and these 5 nodes are connected by some arrows, and those arrows are actually labeled. So that is nothing but the weighting factor. Okay, weighting factor. If the label value or the weighting factor is going to have a higher magnitude, like for example in this case you have 8, so this weighting factor gives us a clear impression that the relationship between the value of A, that is the cluster A, and cluster B is higher. That is, the relationship is higher. So this is the one that we can understand. So the values which are adjacent to the lines or the connection lines which is connecting the different nodes are the ones which are the weighting factors, and those weighting factors are the magnitude of the weighting factors which helps us to understand the closeness between the different nodes that are going to be present in this. So this is an example of a hierarchical clustering scheme. Okay, now you see here, you can see here, so here I have taken the bottom part. Okay, the bottom part, and I'm collecting it. So now based on the minimum distance, okay, based on the minimum distance, as I told you earlier, between B and D, so A and B, between A and B the minimum distance is 1. Now you can see that AB is merged. Okay, between A and B the minimum distance is 1, so that's why you can see in the minimum distance AB is merged. Now, and after that we are redrawing this, we are redrawing it. So AB, so now we can see 4, 4, 5, 3 and 2 and 5 is present. Okay, now again from this you can see that the minimum distance between you are forming 2 segments AB, between CD is there. Okay, minimum distance between CD is there, so that's why C and D are being merged, because the value of 2 is there, so C and D are merged. So what I'm getting is a triangle AB CD with E, AB CD with E, and again you can see that 4 and 5 are remaining as such. The distance between CD and E is 3. Now we are merging it, so we get CDE. Now finally we get 4 is the minimum distance, so finally we get ABCDE. Okay, so the dendrogram is redrawn here. Now we can see that the dendrogram with respect to AB is merged at the initial stage, then CD is merged, and CDE is merged, and then finally we are merging ABCDE at the end. Okay, likewise now previously we have done it with respect to minimum. Now likewise we repeat the same process with respect to the maximum, and by doing so we finally end up with the same thing. So you can see that the dendrogram varies. Now previously based upon minimum values, now we are going with the maximum values. So this is how we perform hierarchical clustering scheme. Okay, now the other thing, now we have discussed about region splitting, region merging, and how to perform clustering, and how divisive clustering, that is splitting, and how agglomerative clustering we have done. And then we moved on to the clustering based upon the hierarchy. For that we made use of the tool which is called as a dendrogram, and by making use of the dendrogram we analyze the overall process. Now we are going for another type of clustering which is called as the region growing clustering, where we take one pixel randomly. Okay, we select a pixel in an image randomly and we label that pixel as the seed and then go for clustering. So connect the relationship between the relationship between the neighboring pixels in the cluster are connected by making use of some kind of similarity measures. Okay, so as soon as that similarity measure is actually introduced, okay, so to what extent that metric value is having the magnitude, so the magnitude of that similarity metric we have to find out, and that magnitude will in turn determine the closeness of the seed with the neighboring pixels. So that is why you see that we basically start grouping it in the form of a clusters, okay, with the newly incorporated pixels, which is the generalized flood fill process. Okay, so when the cluster stops growing, it is the relationship. When I say cluster stops growing, it denotes that the characteristics of the pixels in that particular cluster is in no way connected with the seed region or with the new seed region. So what happens is that we drop out that particular cluster and then we start with the new seed pixel. Okay. So how to do that clustering process? As I told you earlier, finding out the mean relationship between that particular region or finding out the covariance of the pixels in the cluster. So when I say covariance, you have to understand mathematically, correlation is basically a process which helps us to find out the relationship between, for example, let us take a vector. Okay, let us take two vectors, x and y. Okay, so x has 5 elements, y has 5 elements. When I say correlation, between the two vectors xi and yi, that means I am finding out the relationship between x1 y1, x2 y2, x3 y3, x4 y4, x5 y5. That is called as correlation. Whereas when I talk about covariance, or when I talk about covariance, what happens is that it is trying to find out the relation. So obviously I will end up with the matrix x1 with y1, x1 with y2, x1 with y3, x1 with y4, x1 with y5. So what happens? Likewise, x2 with the remaining 5 elements, x3 with the remaining. So by this way, because of 5 elements present in vector 1 and because of 5 elements present in vector 2, covariance will usually end up with the 5 cross 5 matrix. Okay, so this will give us a clear relationship of how these 5 entities are interlinked with each other. Okay, so that's why you see here the distance metric, as I told you earlier, we are making use of the Mahalanobis distance. Okay, with the threshold value of 2.5 sigma. So this is actually the centering value, the standard deviation from sigma to minus 2.5 sigma to plus 2.5 sigma, and then we calculate the distance, and then based upon those pixels which are falling in this sigma region, we categorize them as different clusters. So and then that process is actually updated based upon calculating the mean and covariance value, which are going to be timely updated. Okay, here the one drawback of this region growing method is that this cannot be done simultaneously. Okay, since multiple regions cannot be done simultaneously, you can see that the threshold value that we are going to select, okay, for the distance, like I told you, it should be greater than 0.6 or 0.6. Okay, so the threshold value will play a very important role in determining the efficiency of the overall process. So that is one biggest drawback, because if it is going to be a threshold value which is going to be identified subjectively, then what will happen? It will lead to a lot of problems. Again, it should be objectively done, means again the characteristics of the pixels in turn will determine the efficiency of the system. So it should be done in an adaptive manner. And if I'm going for adaptively determining the threshold value, obviously it increases the complexity of the process. So that is why in the before starting with the presentation, I told you I'll be discussing about the mathematics of the process, and this mathematics in turn will help us to understand how complex the system is. So now if I go with a subjective measure, the efficiency of the segmentation process will come down. If I go with the objective model, then the efficiency increases, but that efficiency is highly tuned by the threshold value. In case if I want to adaptively tune the threshold value, that means for adaptive tuning, there is going to be objective function which is going to be introduced into the system, and this objective function which is going to be introduced in turn increases the computational complexity of the overall process. So that is what is actually the one. So this is the pseudo algorithm for the region growing process, which I'm not going to discuss. I will start with the mathematical process of how it is done. Okay, so that you can analyze. So now let me start with the matrix. Okay, start with the matrix which is going to be initialized with some pixel values. Okay, and push those matrix values into some memory region and start labeling those pixels. How those pixels are going to be labeled? By making use of the mean and the covariance values. And then grow for the single region. Okay, now in the region growing process, what we do is we start with the label of a pixel and iterate that process and start the labeling. So L of x comma y, the one that I told you, start the labeling process. And if this is going to be present in a while loop, and this process is going to be iterated until all the pixels are going to be labeled. Okay, so that's why we are checking for the unlabeled. So in that case, we start with the get seed pixel and then go for the single region growing. So by doing so, we will end up an image of this kind. So you can see an image of a toy here on the left hand side, and this is the segmented image by making use of the region growing process. Likewise, this is another image by drawing contours. So you see here, the reason why I have included this, if you see on the right hand side of the image, the different values of threshold, helps us to distinguish the different regions. You can see an object of a woman, okay, where the R channel of the image is taken. And from that R channel, we are performing gray level transformation. After doing a gray level transformation, for a threshold value of 0, we are getting some clusters like this. For the threshold value, so you can see in the subsequent images, as the threshold value increase, you can see that the clustering process slowly starts to end up with the overall image of the lady in the picture. Okay, so this is actually done because of the threshold value, which in turn acts upon the contours. So you can see on the left hand side, so you can see that the forces or the intensity values which are going to be acting upon that particular contour region determines the contours. Here you can see the smoothing force, the average process that I told you. So the static forces that are placed at the boundary point. So that the one that I told you about the covariance, and the static forces that are going to be present at the junction point. So these are all the mathematical process that is helping us in determining the different types of contours. Okay, so here I'm just taking two examples of the important process related to the papers published by these two people or experts in this area, Ronald Geeman. Okay, so he has given a suggestion of to make use of stochastic relation. Okay, stochastic, what is meant by stochastic relaxation, where what we can do is we are correlating, we are actually taking our pixel values or pixel gray levels, and we are going to make a comparison with the analogous of the basic working of an atom. Okay, where atom basically in the form of molecules, or it is going to be in the form of a arranged in the form of a lattice-like physical system. Okay, so likewise, what we do, we arrange our pixels in the form of a lattice. Okay, and across each region, what we do, we assign some energy values to the pixel. Okay, arrange some energy values to the pixel by making use of the Gibbs distribution. So Gibbs distribution is nothing but it is a part of our Gibbs distribution is nothing but it's kind of assigning a probability value, okay, or a probability measure, such that it gives the probability that the system will be assigned a particular state, and the function of that the state is based upon the state is assigned based upon a function. Okay, so you can make use of a function, and that function will calculate the energy and state energy as well as the temperature. Based upon the energy as well as the temperature of that particular atom or molecule, we basically segregate the atom belonging to this particular cluster. Or likewise, we basically formulate some properties to our pixel, and then we segregate it into different clusters. So that was the idea given by Geeman and Geeman. So that basically falls under the category of stochastic relaxation, where we basically assign it by drawing some link. So that link is determined by making use of my Markovi random field, where this Markovi random field will usually result in a graph. Okay, it is actually a kind of methodology which basically makes use of probabilistic measures. So the like the weighted average that I have discussed earlier, where the node A and node B were connected by making use of weighted averages 8 or 6 some values. Likewise, here in the case of Markovi random fields, that weighted average will be replaced by some probability values. Okay, so this will finally end up in a graph. So that is actually defined by the Markovi random field, and this graph in turn will give us an idea of how these nodes are dependent upon each other. So that is actually called as dependencies, or we can understand what is called as level of dependencies by making use of this Markovi random field. So this is what is called as stochastic reliance. Now coming to the algorithm that I was discussing. So we started with region split, then we went for region merging. Now we are going for the minimum spanning tree. Okay. So the minimum spanning tree algorithm is basically kind of algorithm, a classic algorithm. Before going into that, okay, where the weights are going to be in the form of the weights in turn will determine of the particular nodes to distinguish whether it is actually a pixel or it is a edge pixel. So what we do in the case of minimum spanning tree is that we basically go with the weighted graph arrangement. Okay, weighted graph arrangement where we decompose the image in the form of vertices and edges. Okay, so this basically MST basically decomposes the image into a subset of edges which are connected. Okay, and this connected edges in turn will connect all the vertices together. Okay, so that without any kind of cyclic operation, okay, cyclic incorporation, it finally ends up with the minimum possible total edge weight. Okay, total edge weight. Again, coming back to the earlier formula that which we have studied, the union of all these minimum spanning trees will be your connected components, and this connected component will finally end up with my overall image or image region. Okay, so I will give you one example of this minimum spanning tree because this is very, very interesting. Here I will take the example of a telecommunication company which is trying to lay cable in the neighborhood. Okay, so a telecommunication company, for example, Geo is going to lay cable in a particular in your region. Okay, so it is first assumption is that it is constrained to bury the cable only in the certain paths. Okay, only in the certain paths. What is that certain part? Only you have to lay the cables along the sides of the road, because you should not enter any house. You should not enter any house. Then you should end up with a graph containing only those points and the paths. Okay, so after drawing that graph, we may find that some paths will be very expensive because they are very longer, or you expect the cable to be buried deeper. Okay, so those paths in turn will become the edges with larger weights. You have to understand that after drawing the graph which is going to contain the weights, vertices and the edges, we first draw the after that we are going to go for segregation or separation. So first what we are doing, after drawing the graph, we are finding out the path. Okay, the path which is very expensive. So how to find out the path which is very expensive? Obviously the path which has a longer path, okay, is going to be very expensive. Why? Because I have to lay the cable for a very large distance, and at the same time it should be buried deeper. So these paths will be represented with edges which are having larger weights. Okay, so likewise we can go for the paths which are very short. Obviously the weights will be very less. Okay, so a minimum spanning tree will be finally the one which is going to be the process which is having lowest total cost, representing the least expensive path for laying the cable. So in the example that I have taken, the minimum spanning tree will finally end up with the lowest total cost. That basically gives us the representation of the least expensive path for laying the cable. So this is actually the one that we are going to discuss. So here in the minimum spanning tree, here I have taken the example of the tree where a palm tree is actually found in the beach shore, and behind that you can see water, as well as behind the water you can see the mountains. So on the top of the mountains you can see the clouds. So we are going for agglomerative clustering. So the agglomerative clustering we have discussed earlier, where we basically decompose the entire image into small nodes and then connect those nodes. Okay, finally finding out the weighted average and those pixel values, the weighted average between those neighboring nodes, if they are somewhat closer, merge those nodes such that you basically end up with some kind of structure like this. So repeated merging is obtained by merging those minimum weighted values, minimum spanning tree in a graph. So the example here is, now what are the advantages of this? Anyhow, I'm going to discuss this mathematically. What are the advantages? First and foremost thing is that the region growing, okay, there are two problems. To start with, what pixel? Because there we have selected the pixel randomly. How to select the starting pixels, and how to select the regions, which region should be connected next. So here in this case, because we are going with the minimum values, we can select with the minimum pixel value as well as the minimum distance between the two graphs, or minimum weights between the two nodes. So based upon that, we can go with this MST. Okay, so here you can see an image as a graph. So you can see here each pixel is basically representing a node in the graph, and the overall image corresponds to a graph. So the graph basically comprises of vertices and edges. So you can see a vertex is just a number of number v, and edge comprises of pair of vertices. And if undirected graph, that means you can change the direction also, that is u comma v can be written as v carry v. And then if it is a weighted graph, the connections are going to be connected with some numerical values w of e. So this is the mathematics that we are going to discuss. So we have to understand that we have a graph. The graph is basically decomposed into vertices and edges, where vertex is just a number where you are starting with some numerical values where the arrows are going to intersect, and edge is going to contain a set of vertices. And if it is going to be undirected graph, the vertices, the edges can be moving in multiple directions. And if it is a weighted graph, the connected between the multiple nodes are going to be weighed by some values. Okay, so here is an example. Here is an example. You can see here you have an image which comprises of multiple pixel values, and from that we have drawn the graph here. So on what basis you see here 2 3 2 3, so 1 4 2 1 2 4 1 5, so 2 3 5 2 3 5. Then how this value is assigned? Based upon the minimal values, so now you see that 1 4 2 1 is connected here, 1 4 2 1 is connected here, and the 2 4 1 5 is connected here. You can see that the 3 8 3, because why we have neglected 3 8 3 and 0 6? Because they are not available in the form of pairs. That is why we have neglected it. Whereas 2 4 1 are available in the form of pairs. That is why we have neglected. So you can see 1 2 4 1 and 2 4 1 5 is actually presented. So here we are making use of the absolute difference in the intensity values. Okay, now applying the logic to minimum spanning tree. So where, as I told you earlier, the path that is going to be traversed is nothing but it is going to be a sequence of vertices starting from V0 and goes up to K, such that the vertices V0 and V1, likewise it goes on, the pair of vertices corresponds to a H, okay, for all I. So you can see that when do we get a connection? If there is a path that exists between each pair of vertices, then only we can get a connection. So if the graph is a tree, if connected and acyclic means it should not contain no cycles, it should not contain cycles. If it is cyclic, okay, here you can see the second example is best example of a cyclic graph, because it is one connection, it is closed, so that should not be happening. There is one tree, you can see that all the nodes in that are connected, not a tree because it is acyclic and there is some disjoint nodes. Again, this is not a tree. So now how to go for MST? So how to apply the algorithm? So you are provided with the graph comprising of vertices and edges. So the minimum spanning tree basically comprises of set of edges such that we end up with the tree, and the addition of all those edge weights should be minimal. The addition of all those edge weights should be minimal. So the person who gave us this minimum spanning tree algorithm is the Kruskal algorithm. So in the Kruskal algorithm, let me share an example, and then if I discuss, you will understand. So anyhow, I just discussed this algorithm. So initialize each vertex as a separate set. Okay, sort edges of E. So sort edges of E is nothing but what? Each vertex V1, V2, V3. So now after that V1 and V2, it's a edge. because we are going to group edges, vertices in the form of pairs. So V1 and V2. Okay. Likewise V2, V3. Then take that, sort it. So how to sort it? Because V1 and V2 are connected by the weight values. So if it is going to be a minimum weight value, so it's clearly mentioned that by non-decreasing order. So non-decreasing order, we have to sort it. And finally, we end up with the set which is completely that is null. For each edge u comma v, we apply this logic, and finally, if they are going to be of similar distance value, then we merge them. Okay, now let me share an example and then discuss so that you will understand. Yes, can you see this diagram that has been shared? Hello? 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 Can you see the share the screen? Can you see the screen that has been shared? Okay, so now let us take a set of points. Okay, so this is the graph which comprises of image, so which comprises of vertices. Image is arranged in the form of vertices and edges. So you can see here in this case, we are starting with AD. We are starting with AD. So AD and CE are the shortest edges. How did I determine that? You can see on the left hand side, the weight values of phi is actually assigned to AD and CE. Okay, so now we are selecting AD separately. We are selecting AD separately. Now highlighting it. Then after that, we are going for CE because of the reason that it is minimum value. Likewise, after that, we are going for the next minimum value in this graph, which is 6. Again, highlighting it with green color segment. Okay. Now repeat the same process. Repeat the same process. So the next, after that, the next underweighted value is 7. So 7 is A, B, and B. Okay, because we started with 5. So 5 is AD, CE, and then we move to 6, which is DF, and then now we are moving to 7, which is AB. Okay, so AB is chosen because AB and B, both of them have the weight values of 7. So now AB is chosen arbitrarily and is highlighted. Okay, so now the next highest value. Okay, the reason why this HBD is highlighted, because already there is a connection. Okay, which is already in green color, so between B and D. So in this case, we have to collate A, B, and D together. That is, merging is actually happening here, because the H, B, and D is highlighted in red, because there is already a path between B and D. So what we are doing, we are merging it so that it forms a cycle ABD. Okay, so in that case, we are repeating this process to highlight the next smallest edge BE with segment 7. So now after AB, now we are going for BE. So after drawing BE, you can see C is there and F is there. So this should not be done. If I draw C and F and DE and BD, I will not end up with the tree, because it should not contain cyclic paths. Okay, so by this way, we are going to finally what we are doing. So finally what we are doing, we are going with the edge of length 9 and the minimum spanning tree is found. So you can see that the spanning tree is found with all the edges covered, and the minimum length is found to be 9. So in this graph, the minimum length is 9. So this is how we apply the minimum spanning tree algorithm for our image processing applications. Okay. So again, this is what I was explaining in the Kruskal's MST algorithm. So now I have switched over to the slide. Ma'am, can you see the slide, ma'am? Okay. So the another example of how to understand this Kruskal's algorithm. So here again, going back to the structure A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So how this connectivity is done. So find sets which is actually recursing the traces links, that is equivalent labels, that is labels which are similar how the equivalent label is determined? By making use of the weight matrix and then merge them if they are going to be closely related. Like 6 and 7, we started with 5 and then we moved it to 6. Like that, we are merging them. Okay. So how this is related to image segmentation? Because obviously this question comes to our mind. So because for every image region, developing a tree, minimum spanning tree, so that this minimum spanning tree becomes the representative of the particular image region. So the algorithm that I have explained earlier. Now see here, this is the example. So sorted edges. So here I'm not going to discuss about what is actually happening on the top because already we have discussed it in the previous slide. I'll go to the bottom where you can see specifically A, B, C, D. Okay, if you see C, D, G, C, D, G are neglected. The reason it is because acyclic in nature. That is, they are cyclic to them. So they will lead to disjoint. So they will not end up with a tree. So we will basically remove that. Whereas A connected with A and B connected, E connected with E, G connected with H, so they cannot be ignored. Okay, because you can have connectivity with EF, AB, all these things you can see here. Okay. Hello. Okay, now see here from E that connectivity. So previously that EF, so from E you can see HI, AB, EF. So HI is one set, AI is another, AB together and EF together. Now from HF, so now after rearrangement you can see E is moving towards high. Okay, so sorted edges. So edges are getting sorted. Now you can see here. So I will just do the process. So this is the image. So minimum spanning tree is obtained after step 4. Now observe the image. So you can see that on the image, A, B, C, D is connected, H, I, F, and E is connected. Whereas D and G, as I told you earlier, D and G are not, G is not connected. So pixels grouped correctly. Now see here, 879691022 because they are having minimum values. Okay. Now after that, doing so, we get the MST algorithm. Now how to perform this MST algorithm on my image? So first we apply Gaussian. Okay, first we perform Gaussian filtering. So by making use of a Gaussian kernel whose standard deviation value is going to be equal to square root of 0.5 or variance value is 0.5. Okay, so the main idea is to basically remove or instead of numerical values, we are going to assign floating point values to the edges. So that is the main idea. That is, the weighted values are going to be floating points. Then based upon that, what we do after Gaussian smoothing, then this Gaussian smoothing is going to produce some floating point weight values for all the nodes that are going to be present in the image. Based upon that, what we do, we build the graph. That is by make a graph that is nothing but we formulate the vertices and edges are going to be collected by making use of the adjacency property. That is the 4 adjacency, 8 adjacency or M adjacency. So here we generally do with 4 adjacency, and then the weights between the weights between the nodes are determined by making use of the absolute. So this is the Mahalanobis distance, where you take the pixel value at the location U and the pixel value at the location E, find out the difference. If the absolute value of the difference, intensity difference, is going to be minimal, we assign it at the W. So then we apply this Kruskal algorithm on the entire graph and merge those two regions which meet the criteria. Okay, so this is about your MST segmentation, and see the mathematics of it. So initialize each pixel as a separate set. Okay, and sort the edges by weight in the non-decreasing order, and we can go for U comma V. So in the iterative process. Okay, so I'll just explain it here. So here for each region, you can see a disjoint set data structure containing the maximum edge weights of all edges in regions MST, number of pixels in each region. So this is the table that we draw, and from the table, okay, from the table we find out what are all the pixels which are having the weight, which is having the maximum edges, the maximum edge weights, and based upon the maximum edge weights, then what we do, we apply the distance metric and connect those edge weights. So here you can see that in the bottom, which is given here. So here, after applying that MST segmentation, we are getting these two images, which are as possible. Okay. So more examples of this MST segmentation. So one is the example of the tree that we have discussed. Another example is of the castle, which is across the lake. Likewise, another lake, which is across some region. Okay. Now coming to the next type of algorithm. So what we have seen here is the standard algorithms, which are working based upon the weight values which are assigned to the connectivity. So the connectivity between the pixels are defined by the weight values. In the previous case of region splitting, region merging, all these things, we assign the weight values as such as in the form of integers. But when we go for the minimum spanning tree, we are weighting those integer values by Gaussian weighting. And then we are transforming those weight values. Instead of integers, we are assuming some floating point values, and this is the major difference. Finally, we end up with the minimum spanning tree, such that it brings down the complete computational complexity of the overall process. Now, the next type of algorithm that we are going to discuss is watershed algorithm. So before starting with the watershed algorithm, we have to keep in mind that this is a different type of segmentation algorithm that exploits the morphological properties, that is of pixels, like whether the pixel values are connected. Okay, whether it is connected pixel value, whether it is pixel can be eroded, or whether the pixel can be dilated. That is erosion or dilation are nothing but the process of growing the region or shrinking the region. Okay, so those morphological properties that we are going to make use of in the case of our watershed segmentation algorithm. Here, the main intention of this watershed segmentation algorithm is that instead of directly working on the image values or the pixel values as such, which we have seen in the standard algorithms, here we are going to work on the gradient of the pixel values, because the gradient of the pixel values will provide a clear distinction between the different pixel regions or different pixel values, and it will help us to identify or distinguish the different pixels based on the polarities. So that's the reason what we do. We basically go for taking the gradient of the image, so the gradient magnitude, not on the gradient angle. We are basically taking the gradient magnitude. So here you can see the interpret the gradient image as a topological surface. So you see there is the magnitude values in the form of the gradient. Okay, the gradient is actually moving towards the maximum. So all the pixels in the catchment, so now those pixels values which are having minimum values are monotonically decreasing. You can see now, again going back to the same diagram, those regions where the gradient value decreases, you can see that the monotonicity property is actually understood here, where you can see that it is decreasing. Okay, from the decreasing you can see that sorry. So from the regions you can see that it is decreasing, and that itself is a clear picture that they are going to be collected in separate basins. That basins are called as catchment basins. So the pixel values whose values are having minimum gradient will be collected in the catchment basin. Okay, so now the pixel values which are having maximum magnitude are going to be gradient magnitude are going to be identified as watersheds, and minimum values which are monotonically minimum gradient, not minimum values as such, minimum gradient which are monotonically decreasing, those values are retained as catchment basin. Okay, so this was given by the people called as their author Vincent Soil. So water immersion. Okay, what we do in the case of water immersion, we basically puncture holes at each local minimum, so that water starts to slowly, so puncture holes in the nothing but the catchment basin. So we basically puncture holes in the catchment basin because that is local minima. So via that local minima, so local minima is nothing but one region of my catchment basin. We just punch a hole, and then we start introducing water in those regions. And then as soon as the water gets introduced, so we perform region growing, and because of the water getting introduced, so slowly that region will slowly start to darken itself. Okay, so okay, so then for that what we do, after that what we do, we sort it by making use of the gray level distinction. So how the gray level distinction is sorted out by making use of the histogram with pointers, and then repeat the process, that is the flooding process, then repeat the process. Okay, again after that has been done, find the downhill path to draw the crest lines or the watershed lines that we have seen. So downhill path from where it has reached the maximum and then come down. So that downhill path will be formulated to form the watershed lines. Okay, so this is how the path will be taken. Okay, so now initially what we do, we create a new basin, and multiple basins are created by making use of breadth first search algorithm, and then we are merging those regions, and then we see that the basin gets extended. So this is actually graphically illustrated here. So the visual explanation of the same process. So if you see on the left hand side, the crust lines are completely blurred. So I'm going to puncture it with the water, so that the water slowly starts to fill the first region. So that is why it's dark. And again you can see that the region gets somewhat intensified, and then in the last image of D, you can see that after 2 stages of flooding, the dark black region has completely vanished. Likewise, after multiple stages of flooding, you can see that after this point has been done, okay, you see that the crust lines are slowly disappearing. Crust lines are slowly disappearing because of the flooding process. And finally, we are able to see the watershed lines in the last region. So this is the watershed process. So how to do this watershed process? For that, what we do, across the different catchment basins, we are going to build dams. So that building of dam is done by making use of the morphological operations. So the morphological operations are nothing but the dilation operation in this case. So you can see here two catchment basins are identified in black color, and then we are applying the gradient and then formulating the watershed lines. So this watershed lines, after the flooding, you can see that it is bounded now. After that, we are going for shrinking, that is by making use of that crusty, that is the watershed process, where you can see that those two regions are merged with X regions in between. Okay, with X regions in the between, where these points corresponds to the dams or the data points, which helps us to connect the catchment basin 1 with the catchment basin 2. So this will serve as the dam. Okay, this will serve as the dam. So now we can see that this is on a medical image we have taken, and we have applied this. Now we can see that watershed is this thing, and you can see that the watershed lines are clearly visible. Okay, so here we are witnessing here is the gradient image. The first image is the actual image of the electrophoresis image. Then we are taking the gradient of it and then applying the segmentation algorithm. Then you can see that result of applying the watershed algorithm to the gradient image. If over segmentation is done, you can see it is blurred. So this is the process. Okay, so to avoid this, what we do, we basically fuse the concept of markers. So after the segmentation process, what we do, we basically assign some marker values, so that this marker will become a unique representative of that particular region. Okay, so this goes on until I perform segmentation. So now marker based watershed segmentation. So now what we do, we basically perform thresholding. So this is just a pseudo process of the overall process. Anyhow, I'm going to discuss the mathematics of it shortly. So first what we do, we find out the threshold, and after thresholding, we segment the image. After decomposing it into different segments, we compute the difference between chamfer distance and then draw the watershed lines between the different objects. Okay. After drawing these watershed lines, okay, we have to puncture. So the puncture is nothing but we are setting the blobs that we have seen, the blobs here, we are seeing here, the blobs which you are seeing here, we are setting the blobs to 0 in the gradient image. For every pixel, that is the gradient of the pixel is taken. If the maximum gradient of the pixel, that is the gradient of x comma y is taken, and it is compared with 1, and then if that maximum gradient is going to be greater than 1, so we take that maximum value, and then that will be assigned as the okay, so that will be assigned to the gradient. If the marker pixel, okay, x comma y, and the gradient of x comma y, both of them equal to 0, then in case we stop the process. Okay, so only the new basins will be introduced if the value is 0. Okay, so this is about the algorithm, pseudo algorithm. So we just drop this. Okay, now coming to the mathematical process. So like the region growing, region splitting, and the minimum spanning tree Kruskal algorithm, we made use of some numerical values. Now we are going to make use of a similar kind of numerical explanation here. Okay, so here I have the gradient magnitude of the image. So gradient magnitude of the image. Now I am listing out the pixels. Okay, listing out the pixels. So the pixel values, you can see that the pixel values are 0, 1, and it goes up to 8. The magnitude of the gradients, not the pixels, sorry. The magnitude of the gradient is ranging between 0 to 9. So you can see that. Now, the next thing is computing the pixel list. So 0, what is the location of 0? So now if you see 0, the indices value is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Likewise 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Row wise 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and column wise 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0 is present at the location first column, third row. First column, third row. Okay. So that is 0. Likewise 1 is present across 4 locations. You have 3, 1 across here. Okay, that is first column, third row here, and you have second column, okay, third row is here, and 1, 4 that is here, and 4, 4 that is here. So you have totally 4 gradient values of 1, and that is written here. Likewise for the remaining pixels, we can write it like this. So what is that we have done? 0, 0, just a moment, just okay, sir. Thanks, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can be. Yes, sir. So with this example, I will wind up the session. So now in the labels, so connected component labels, all of them are okay. All of them are fixed as unlabeled. So now start with the step 3, k equal to 0. So start the grow catchment basis. So now no frontier, because for 0 there is no other 0. So now what we do? So none to grow. So what we do? We start with the new catchment basin. So what we do? We are going for 1. Okay, now we initialize k with 1. So wherever we add 1, which are closer to 0, we are initializing it to 0. Okay, now there is no again 0 to 0. You can see there is no frontier to go. So now we are creating new basins. Okay, k equal to 1 and k equal to 2. So in k equal to 1 to 2, what we are doing, the adjacent two values, the connectivity between 1 2 is rephrased to 1 1. Likewise, 2 1 is rephrased to 2. So this, by this way we are going to construct the bases. Okay. So final result. So after doing that, what we have done here is, the final result is that only those regions which are having all the zeros, you can see that all the gradient magnitude values are now replaced with zeros, ones and twos. Okay, so this is how we have labeled that 5 cross 5 image into zeros and ones. Okay, so there are two, for example, now there are two markers here indicated. Uh, okay, sir, ma'am, I will wind up the presentation, ma'am. I think so. I've taken too much time. Hello. Ma'am, sir. Sir, session wind up பண்ணிடுறேன் sir. Yes sir, yes sir.
Sir,
Here, ma'am, will start.
sir.
You, turn on the
Ma'am, I can hear you, ma'am.
Hello, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you, ma'am.
Here some settings problems came, sir. In between also we are able to hear you, but we are not able to respond, sir. In between also,
Okay.
we also feeling embarrassing. And that
Okay,
doesn't
ma'am.
seems to be good.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I think so. I have exceeded the given time, ma'am. So I'll stop the session, ma'am. I'll wind up the session, ma'am.
Okay, sir. But the things are very nice, sir. You covered all the advanced algorithms, so watershed algorithm and spanning tree algorithm, different algorithms which are useful in doing semantic segmentation. These algorithms will play key role, I think, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, thank you so much for your contribution in this workshop, sir. From our side, we are grateful to you, sir. As a token of request, we are presenting a small award, sir, digital award, sir. Please accept, sir, from our side.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
And the same way, we are extending our thanks, sir, with the help of thank note. So please accept our thanks, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you,
Please,
ma'am.
sir,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, do you have? I think so. I have winded up, ma'am. Do they have any queries? If at all, if they have,
Yeah, that
they
part
can,
we will come, sir. That part we will come. So thank you, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Now I request all the
Yes, ma'am.
participants, if you are having any doubts, please interact with the sir. Immediate unmute అయిపోయింది.
Hello. So, do you have any queries?
I think it may be the lunch time, probably that might be
Yes,
one
yes.
reason, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am,
So much, sir.
shall I wind up, ma'am?
Yeah,
yes,
sir.
sir, yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Next.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Request for all the participants. Next session is regarding two packages. We are going to discuss pandas and numpy. So I request all of you please join at 2:30. Thank you.
It's a physical, then we have to give you 4:30 college close time. If you start